This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Rock and Roll Denim, Bill Fick Ford, the WCRA, and Resistol. Bill Fick Ford, the #1 Super Duty dealer in the entire country, is still taking care of their customers. It's hard to get trucks right now, but there's some perks when you're the #1 Super Duty dealer in the country. You still got trucks. Go to BillFickFordHuntsville.com to get the no bull discounts that no one else is giving during this crazy time that we're living in. Bill Fick Ford is still the place to go. In fact, if you ask me, it's the only place to get a new Super Duty dealer today. Bill Fick Ford. The Women's Rodeo World Championship is the largest purse in the history of women's rodeo, paying out a total of $750,000. The event will take place October 26th through the 29th in Las Vegas at the South Point Arena. Each Women's Rodeo World Champion will take home a minimum of $60,000 each, while the all-around champion will collect a minimum of $20,000. The championship event dishes out equal money in all disciplines. This is your chance at a piece of that $750,000 purse. Earn your position on the leaderboard by nominating your team roping, breakaway, and barrel racing runs with the WCRA. Visit womensrodeoworldchampionship.com to learn more on how to qualify for the richest event in history of women's rodeo. Again, that's womensrodeoworldchampionship.com.
What sets Resistol apart is the legacy of the cowboys who wear the brand. These traditions are passed down from fathers to sons, from heroes to future champions. Since 1927, Resistol has been handcrafting the finest American-made cowboy hats. Generation after generation, we live it every day.
This is The Gauge with host Chance Conradu.
Are you freaking serious? It's Conrado. This is The Gauge, and I am Chance Conrado. On this episode of the podcast, we have got Britt Longoria. Britt is a pretty fantastic lady. She has spent so much time in Africa and around the world going on various types of hunts. She's a conservationist. She's an amazing storyteller. You guys, listen to this one. You may only like to listen to the barrel racers and all this, but this lady is a badass. She tells amazing stories, and there's something to be learned from people who are so cultured and have spent so much time around the world that it just makes for great listening and watching on YouTube. So check it out. Well, you have been talking to our team for, you said years. I think we settled on a year, but you're finally here. And I've been listening to Riley's feedback on you and did my own kind of looking into what you're all about. And I'm pretty excited to talk to you because it sounds like you've lived a pretty cultured and interesting life. Not a traditional life for most petite blonde ladies. So I'd like to hear all about it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I guess for me, it's pretty normal.
Yeah. Your normal is not everybody else's normal, I bet.
I'm just a little girl from Maine.
Yeah.
Yep, just grew up on the coast and had some cool parents that said, yeah, do whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
We support you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go all the way back to your childhood in Maine and kind of set the stage for people who maybe don't know who you are. Because we've got a large audience, and some of them may know who you are, but I bet most of them don't. So let's go way back to whatever part of Maine you grew up in. Where was it?
Just outside Freeport. Mm-hmm. So if you know LL Beans, that's Freeport, Maine. Southern coastal area. Grew up there in the 90s.
Ooh.
So I'm old, huh?
You want to know something?
What?
I was born in the 90s.
Yeah, so I'm older than you.
Anyway, proceed.
No, so grew up on the coast of Maine, ran bird dogs, and did the whole, family were hunters and enjoyed the outdoors, had a great cabin, downhill skiing, dog sledding, snowshoeing, just kind of the whole outdoor lifestyle aspect. And woke up one day, I think I was about 12, and said, I want to own a safari company in Africa.
Where'd you get that idea?
I don't know. I literally woke up and was like, that sounds like a really good idea. So I literally had graph paper out, and I would draw out the floor plans and lay out where the kitchen versus the accommodations versus this versus that, and create these like trifold brochures of like my little mock safari company, hand them out to people, see if they wanted to come.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, so that was my dream. And Mom and Dad were like, great, maybe next year you'll want to be a fireman, and maybe the next year you'll do something else. And that's awesome. But they never poo-pooed it or anything. And we traveled a lot. So, going overseas or something was never a scary thing or a intangible dream. And then being is actually Safari Club International. They have local chapters. It's kind of a hunting organization. And my folks were really involved with volunteering for this club. And it kind of opened my mind up to international hunting. And we had met a hunting company that were there for the annual gala fundraiser. And it was, seeing me at 12 or 13 running around helping my parents. And they thought, wow, she's selling raffle tickets. She's setting up silent auction stuff. She's hired, cute little girl. We'll take her to Africa with us. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Mom, Dad, I got my first job. They invited me to come to Africa. Let's do this. And so they're like, you're still a little bit young. Like, let's wait a little bit. So then by the time I was 15, I was still on track that, this is what I want to do. And they said, okay, for your summer break, we'll put you on a plane and then we'll have them pick you up on the other side and you can spend 3 months in Africa. So when I was 15, I went to Africa the first time by myself to go work for a safari company.
What part of Africa?
South Africa. Kind of the Diet Coke of Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, depending on who you talk to. Because there's some pretty rough areas in South Africa.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's still like rough as in people rough or wilderness rough?
Well, so I know some people who do safaris in South Africa, and they've some pretty horrendous stories.
Yeah.
But I think it's the northern part, right, where it's harsher. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's still when I say Diet Coke, I mean because the population is so high in South Africa, and there is so much development. It's really not a third world country. I mean, you have 4-story high malls and beautiful highways and toll roads and beautiful office corporate buildings and downtown Johannesburg. And so it's not wild and woolly Africa.
Right.
Maybe that's a better.
Yeah,
way
not
to
like
say.
the upper portion of Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, Elon Musk is from South Africa, so that immediately disqualifies it as third world.
There you go.
Just that.
Right there.
And that's where the electric cars came from, and like PayPal or whatever he does. He's in Texas now. So.
Some of them won't make fun of him too much.
Yeah,
At least he made some right choices along the way.
A few, right? When you live in Texas now too, right?
I do.
So you made some right choices. Everyone has.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of what you said that a lot of people just wouldn't be able to relate to. Obviously, you probably know that. You didn't grow up normal, obviously, but what did your parents do that kind of set the stage for you to have these ideas on the type of person you wanted to be, right? Because, if you were to say, I wanted to be a varsity cheerleader, I'd be like, that makes sense. I want to go start a safari company in South Africa. Does not make sense.
Yeah, probably not.
So what was it that they kind of implemented in raising you that made you kind of such a different person?
Well, I'd say my dad. My dad was just a adventurer. He was an adrenaline junkie. He raced anything and everything. He grew up on a horse farm. He raced harness racing. He grew up with a mom that was a Southern belle from Texas, and a dad that was a lineman, was a telephone company guy, owned telephone companies throughout New England. And it was kind of his dreams and desires and passions were photography and mountaineering. In the 70s, he qualified to climb Everest, and that was before oxygen stuff. And, he needed to have the certain, how many 14ers in order to be able to qualify to do that. I mean, it really was something versus what it is today.
Sure.
He ran around and did business. He and Mom both started a company that was telephone engineering, and they designed the telephone systems in East and West Africa Asia, South America. They're one of the largest companies to handle fiber optics. And so that was in the 70s and 80s. So I grew up on bedtime stories of these international type travel things with a dad that was, like I said, just an adrenaline junkie. And his normal were going to a business meeting, following a team of people in Jeeps with AK-47s to go meet the latest dictator of Sierra Leone, Africa. So that was, hey, it's a normal business meeting, kind of those types of things. So I guess that my normal was very similar to his normal,
Sure.
where dugout canoes and eating, pineapples on the side of the road because that's the only safe food to eat while traveling through West Africa or something like that. So those are my bedtime stories.
Yeah, you forgot to mention that he obviously drank a lot of Dos Equis beer because he sounds just like the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world.
No, for sure. And he had this awesome white handlebar mustache.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're just stereotyping your dad so much right now. White handlebar mustache, Safari King, climb Everest. Like you don't even have to know anything about that, and you know exactly what he looks like. That's
100%.
That's pretty interesting.
No, and so I'd say that my dad developed I don't want to say no fear, because I certainly have fear, but that you can do whatever you want. If you want to go out there and do it, rock on, girl. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so he was definitely the pusher from the outside. And my mom was always kind of the internal compass. That my mom's very religious. She's from Russian descent, so I grew up Russian Orthodox. All of kind of the spiritual internal side comes from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I have a good balance between the two.
Yeah, sounds like it. Were you the only child? Or did
Sort
you have
of.
siblings? Really?
My dad had a son and a daughter from a previous marriage.
Oh, okay.
And so between my dad and my mom, it was just me, and they were older, so they were off in boarding school and stuff growing up. So I have the nice element of having a brother and sister, but not still kind of being raised like an only child.
Sure. Okay, so that kind of sets the stage for how you got the mentality you did, which is just still, it's so wildly different from just what a normal, my dad worked at UPS, which is great, because I think it's important to talk to people who have unique parents who did unique things, because what's going on in the world right now is those type of people are going away, and they're being replaced with like people who don't leave their houses and
Are scared to leave their houses
or do anything that's not on a phone or digital, and it just feels like anybody who was that old breed of adventurer or safari hunter or mountain climber, just any of those things, big time rodeo cowboys, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a dying breed. And I think that's one of the reasons we do this show, and that I created the show, so that we could hear from those people to try to keep it alive, because it just feels like it's going away. It doesn't. But, if you just look like at your phone, like everyone does, you see that little thing at the end of the week, and you spent 4.5 hours per day on your phone. You're like, whoa, God.
Gosh.
How? When? I don't know. But you see people doing these things. Like, you could go to your Instagram or someone like you's Instagram and see all these great things. But most people aren't even attempting that. And it's because they don't have a background like you. They don't know that they can do those things or believe that it's even possible, maybe. And so it's really refreshing to talk to somebody who just knew. Like, they knew from the time they were whatever age, 12, I think you said, that they're going to be that. And then you did it. Because most people don't stick to stuff.
Now I'm kind of one of those girls that once you make up your mind, that's it. I'm going to do this. And I mean, I remember my mom and dad said, okay, well, great. You've done these, trips to Africa, and you've spent, I don't know, a couple months a year out of your year being down in a safari company and stuff, and doing game capture and all these different elements within the safari world. Okay, now it's time for college. So where are you going to go? Well, okay, this and this. I'm like, well, you need to go to school in the United States for at least 1 year so you know the difference. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, let me get into school. I went to the University of Denver, and as soon as I finished a year, then I moved to South Africa permanently.
Really?
And so I finished my undergraduate at 20 University of Technology, which was at the time Pretoria Technicon. So I studied natural sciences and business management and got a degree in ecotourism. And what was so cool about that was that it allowed me to better understand the regional complexity of wildlife conservation, indigenous people, politics, nonprofits and NGOs, international tourism, and all these different layers that tie into the safari industry. So it wasn't just like, hey, I'm here and I'm working and I want to do a safari lodge. It was really diving into all these multi-layers that create the good stuff and the bad stuff around high impact tourism versus sustainable use, the hunting versus photographic safaris, and all those different elements.
Yeah, when there's just tons of misconceptions surrounding the entire industry of safari, especially the hunting side. I mean, I imagine that conservation portion is probably really important to you, or it seems like it is, because that's one of the biggest issues out there with just the way the modern world views people who do that. Obviously, and I think Riley was telling me you were targeted in a way, like most people who get a photo of them captured with, whatever it is they took. I think yours was a leopard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've had one of our friends, Kendall Jones, hers was a lion, and there's a dozen different people who've kind of been wrapped up in that. But what do you think the main reason people don't understand the safari hunting industry? I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, obviously you're outspoken about it, but where is the disconnect, and why is that such a thing still, just decade after decade?
Well, you have two elements. You have that if you look at the kind of the U.S. perception of stereotypes, that when we do research, you have 80% of Americans don't agree with trophy hunting. So the concept of trophy hunting is shooting something just for hide or horn or antler or tooth or tusk or whatever. So 80% of people say you're an asshole if you're a trophy hunter. And if you're a safari hunter, that ties into that stereotype.
Yeah,
so then
default, you're a trophy hunter.
Automatically, whatever. It doesn't matter if you ate that meat or whatever, if it was used for something or had a conservation management, like a population management type thing. Doesn't matter. You're already in that category if you go overseas, period. So in juxtaposition with the 80% of people that don't like trophy hunting, 75% of Americans believe that hunting is okay if it's for meat, if it's for a conservation benefit that benefits game animals as well as non-game animals, and also if it's scientifically managed, regulated with ethical boundaries and things from a legal perspective. So if you have those three things, you're good. Food, conservation, legality. High five. But again, if you put in the word trophy, all of a sudden that hunter is totally weaponized and becomes a villain. So I think that one of the big issues is describing who the hunters are as individuals and breaking down those stereotypes. And as you said, I walk into the studio and you're like, I wouldn't really have pegged you as a big game hunter.
No, you wouldn't. Yeah, by design, I think.
And so that's what's really powerful and interesting as a gift that I've been given, is because I can break those stereotypes. And the number one reason why someone would be supportive of hunting versus not supportive of hunting is not if they've hunted or not, it's if they know a hunter or not. And so much of what you see on social media is kind of that final result where it's like, hey, here's my white-tailed deer, and I'm holding up the antlers and the damn tongue's hanging out, and there's blood on it.
Grin.
And it's like, my gosh, guys, you have this climax of an event, but you're showing just like this tiny little portion of it versus having a backstory and saying that you've been hunting this one white-tailed deer for about 3 years, and you've been watching him grow, and it finally came right that he came under the tree stand or through the blind or whatever, and there's no emotion to it. It's just the elation. And it is so miscommunicated when you see someone holding up a dead animal smiling. For someone who's never hunted before, I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's like, why are you happy over a dead animal? Like, that's kind of...
Yeah, I guess if you really think about it from like a psychological standpoint,
it's kind of creepy.
You do look a little weird. Yeah, it is a little strange.
I mean, it's totally fine to have a steak at a steakhouse and be like, hey, it's my birthday, and,
right.
Here's a dead animal. But it's that steak was maybe wrapped in plastic versus fur at that moment, kind of a thing. So I think that there's just that huge disconnection of people understanding where their food came from and where they fit into that role that oftentimes a lot of people are more comfortable with paying someone else to do the killing. And ultimately, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you have a society though when you have 380 almost 400 million people just in this country alone, I mean, not everyone's going to be able to hunt their food. I think that's one of the funny things about the photography aspect of it, right? It's like, that's a really old tradition, but that's because of how difficult it was to actually get that food, right? And it was just a kind of the finality of, look, we did it, and this is the only way we can commemorate things. And we've carried that into the social media era where every Tom, Dick, Harry, Jane, whatever, who pays a few $1,000 to sit there and shoot a trophy deer can do that. And then they take that picture and it creates this kind of awful stereotype, right? It's like if you think about hunters, I hunt, and obviously you hunt, he does not hunt, but if you could tell. But there's a stereotype if you've got friends who have never hunted, who don't hunt, if you know people who do or don't. It's much like, my whole world's been rodeo. That's where I grew up. And the thing's always, those two type of, like the Western world and like the hunting world, they've always been a parallel because at one point they were together. But there's a lot of stereotypes, right? You think of your traditional hunter, you're thinking this Jim Shockey looking guy who's not overly polished or cultured or what have you. And in reality, the people who do those type of hunts are generally really highly intelligent people like yourself, very well at dictating and speaking and communicating what actually is going on. And I think it's really important that people like you and others who do that get out in the public and change the narrative. And I think that's what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I hope I am, because you kind of touched on my leopard photo going around the world and all the hatred and everything that came from it. I was very, very private about my hunting. I work in conservation and the environmental field, and so my hunting had to be private for my livelihood. I couldn't afford to tell people and risk being ostracized and being misunderstood based on my livelihood of the conservation field. And oftentimes it's so... Again, the stereotypes of that, well, if you're a conservationist or you're an environmentalist, then you're not a hunter. How can that be the same thing? How can you kill an animal and have it be conservation? That people always are like, oh, hunting's conservation. Well, what the heck does that mean? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.
On the surface level. And hunters often use that as a response or a knee-jerk defense or whatever. But that's not why we go hunting. And it's the same reason in the Western lifestyle stuff that it's like there is a sacredness, a heartbeat in why we choose to live the way that we do. Why do we choose to live on a ranch raising cattle or trading horses versus getting a corporate job? Because there's something in your heart that says, this is what I'm meant to do. I'm good at this. I know this. This is what's right for me and my family. And it's the same thing with hunting, and being able to articulate kind of these intangible elements is very difficult. And if you look at the demographics of hunters, stereotypically they're male. And again, culturally, stereotypically, men don't rely on emotions to explain something. Men usually go on the rational, rigorous, scientific-based defense. Like, we're taught within the hunting industry and the hunting community that you defend yourself by saying, this is conservation, this creates jobs, this is, rural economics, this is Robin Pittman's act from taxing on ammunition, firearms. But that's not why you do it. There's something, again, intangible. And the more that we can share the personal reason why, if you're out somewhere in Idaho and listening to this podcast and you think about that warm coffee steaming in your hand and looking over the range and seeing the mountains in the background and being like, man, this is the best life I could ever have. That's why you do it. It's for moments like that.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the thing within the hunting world, is that if there can be a shift away from kind of that rigorous rationalism where it's so black and white, well, I do this because da-da-da-da-da. It's like, no, tell them about why you do it as an individual. And then that's what changes the narrative.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, you really, you don't ever change people's minds with facts. I mean, we've learned that politically, especially in the last couple of years. Facts don't matter, especially anymore. But emotions do, because every decision people make, like a human being, as a creature of habit, 90% of the decisions you or I make, or anybody has made in their life, generally they're emotional, right? I think that's a driving factor, especially when you're younger. But you say those things the way you said that, that was beautifully said. That could actually resonate with somebody. But if you go, well, actually, just so you know, for you to go to the national forest, 90% of that money actually comes from hunters and their conservation.
Blah, 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 blah.
Great. Like, no one cares about that. Like, the chances that that's true is like 50% anyway, because nothing you hear or regurgitate is generally true. So people aren't going to believe that anyway. But yeah, if you tell this like eloquent story about why and how and the purpose behind it, I think that's maybe how you do affect change on a grassroots level.
Well, and it's also something that we look at, what's the quick fix? How can we make people stop hating us? Stop hating hunters. Well, the thing is that it's harder to hate an individual. It's so easy to hate a stereotype. But when you get down to, again, that nitty-gritty, bloody, messy, gnarly aspect of what you're doing, my husband and I, we walked over 200 miles over 35 days after a Lord Derby eland in Cameroon, which is West Africa. Mm-hmm. Over 105 to 115 degree temperature. I mean, you're literally not sweating because as soon as you perspire, it's already dry. I mean, it's that hot. It's wild. And the intensity of those types of hunts are so magnified that I can literally close my eyes and think about taking steps and seeing the ground and seeing the individual leaves like crunch and just like break apart because they're so dry and it's like a puff of dust, or seeing a little tick dried in the mud and the shell just kind of catches the sunlight and just shines brightly, or feeling all of the sweat bees landing on you and getting in your eye to the point where you can't even open your eyes because they're just trying to get the tiniest bit of moisture and going up your nose, and all you're hearing is just this buzz of animals and insects and birds and everything, and it's almost like an outer body experience. And it's like, that's why I hunt, to have those incredible moments in nature where I am so planted in that moment that I'm not thinking about, my Instagram, or I need to double check my emails and make sure that it's like that's the addiction, is to get out there and be a wheel inside a wheel, a gear inside of a gear, and be part of the wilderness versus just a spectator or just a participant climbing up the mountain, taking a couple pictures and getting out. It's that submersion.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you experience it on any level, and even like your Middle America white-tailed deer hunt, let's say that's the only hunt you do in a year. and it wears off, but if you do that feeling that you get up in the morning, it's freezing, you're hiking out to get to your stand, you can see your breath, you can't see anything. You know, everybody knows, like, if you hunt white-tailed deer out of a tree stand in Missouri or wherever it is, or Nebraska, well, they don't really do tree stands in Nebraska, but you know what I mean. There's just something about it that just time stops.
Yeah.
And the saddest part of it is a few days removed from that, like, you lose it and it's gone, because you get back into those emails. You get back into whatever you have to do to continue moving your life forward. And it's very depressing that you don't get to just live that way. Like, if you were born 100 years ago, 200 years ago, not having running water and, you know, like being able to shave your face, or in your case, your legs and everything else. But, like, there's some stuff that's amazing about modern society, but I have always felt like, God, if I could go back for like a year and just live back then, just to see what it would be like to only be connected to that. You're not connected to anything else. You might have fire's your only source of light. Like, how amazing would that be? And maybe that's why you like to go, because in Africa, those safaris, like, you don't have the Omni to stay at. You don't have your choice of 30 different steakhouses within 5 square miles of where you're at. It's like, you're there to hunt. You're going to sleep in the dirt. You're going to be the only person who looks like you in that entire area. I mean, I've not been to Africa, but I will at some point. I have to imagine that feeling that you get just on any type, whether it's a duck hunt, right? I grew up in Colorado, and so that's like a waterfowl top 10 place, right? And that's all we did from October to beginning of February. And you do that Saturday and Sunday. You're freezing in a cornfield, or you're freezing in a duck blind on the river. And it's like, most people don't understand why you would do that, but it's that connection, that immersion, like you said, and you get so addicted to that everything else kind of is built around making that happen.
Well, and looking forward to it,
Yeah.
and then reminiscing with your hunting buddies about last year, and wasn't it hilarious when Billy fell in the river, and
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's so many elements that are tied to the experience of it, above and beyond the quote unquote killing of something, that it's hard to articulate that on a social media platform.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to be careful with when we do share something where it's a grip and grin photo or a trophy photo, whatever, that we also emphasize everything around that moment too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's well, and there's certain people who have helped kind of romanticize it, so it's at a better place than it probably was before, but guys, Rock and Roll Denim has absolutely changed the game when it comes to the performance and style in Western jeans. Top competitors like Shad, Tim O'Connell, Shelly Morgan, you name it. Your boy right here, we're all wearing Rock and Roll Denim inside and outside of the arena. It gives you the flexibility you need to win, as well as looking absolutely great in your interviews, appearances, whatever it is you're doing. Even when you're just doing podcasts like me. I had a chance to go to Rock and Roll Denim's factory the other day and pick out all the pants I wanted. Here's the thing. I got to try on a bunch of their new jeans. I love the men's revolver jeans with the reflex stretch technology because they're comfy. They're not stiff like some of the other jeans. Go check them out at rockandrolldenim.com or follow Rock and Roll Denim on Facebook and Instagram for the newest trends in Western fashion. rockandrolldenim.com. Texas Saddlery is my go-to place for custom leather work this holiday season. Not only do they do custom saddles and tack, but they have some of the best silver work in the business, and of course, every hand-tooled leather product you could imagine. I love their belts. You're not going to find a better belt. They are made from 100% high-grade U.S.-raised cowhides. They're rough enough to ride the fences, classy enough for a night out on the town. So fancy, in fact, the one and only Miranda Lambert commissioned Texas Saddlery to make her custom gun holsters. Texas Saddlery is the new look of the Old West. Go to txsaddlery.com. Again, that's txsaddlery.com to shop their great holiday specials or get great ideas on corporate gifts this holiday season. And don't forget to grab one of their belts, guys. txsaddlery.com. Guys, mark your calendar booked January 30th, 2 to 5 p.m. in Sunset, Texas at Double X Equine. The fantastic Lieutenant Colonel Alan West is coming for a meet and greet. He's there to answer any questions you have because he is running for governor in the 2022 race here in Great Texas. He has some phenomenal ideas. We here at The Gauge, 100% endorse Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. He just appeared on an episode of The Gauge. I encourage you to go check that one out. Remember, save the date. Don't do anything but this on January 30th. Whether you agree with us or disagree with us, we want you to come. Everyone's welcome. There's going to be food, probably going to be a badger. Come on. Maybe it's not so bad to be ostracized from the rest of the world in some ways, though, right? Because, I mean, the world, the way it functions right now, just as a whole, do you really want to be a part of all that? I don't. I'd rather be kind of weird or considered to be different. I'm sure you would. I don't think you have any issue with that.
Nope, not anymore.
Yeah, but what you can't do is you can't make everybody like you. There's just a human element that people want to be liked, right? They don't like the idea of being disliked, especially in your own groups, right? Like if there's people in the safari community who don't like you, that affects you way more than like people on Instagram not liking you. But if you can get to the point maybe where it doesn't matter, right? Where you don't care and you only care about the things that like stoke a fire in you or make you filled with joy, because that's like a rare thing. You go through most of your day not feeling that. So if you can sometimes and not be worried about what other people think, like you, it seems like that, just the way you talk. Normal people don't talk like that because they'd be too worried about what people would think about how excited they are about what they're saying. That's how I know you don't care, because you wouldn't talk like that if you did. Because I'm also one of those weird people who will overemphasize words, and sometimes people are like, why are you talking like that? What do you mean the glisten from the beetle? You know? Easy, Hemingway.
No, but
I like it.
But at the same time, it's I'm going to agree with you and I'm going to disagree with you, because there is to hunt is to be human. So there is an element that if someone doesn't like hunting, there is an element that they don't like within themselves, because we biologically were created as hunter-gatherers. That's how we developed to where we are, with our, eating meat and developing protein for our brains to expand and blah, 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 all this evolution mumbo jumbo. But ultimately, in order for people to survive, at some point there is a gut pile on the floor. Whether you're eating vegetables that were, they plowed the field and ran over rabbits and frogs and snakes and stuff like that, or, eating a steak or eating some venison or whatever. In order to live, there's a life-death-life cycle. And I mean, I think that one of the really, really special elements that hunting allows modern humans to feel, just like a ranching community or anything like that ties humans to the earth and to kind of where they are in the bigger picture. I mean, you take a look at fire. We don't need to have candles in here to light up the room. We don't need to have a fire to heat our house. Yet, modern times, we still have fireplaces in our house. Or we'll buy a candle and light it and dim the lights in the room to enjoy the flicker of the flame. Because there is something innate within us, in our DNA, that says this is sacred, this is special, I know this is safe, I know this is calming, I know this tells me something in my psyche that, wow, this is what I want. And I think that that's really, really special, to have that recognition of us being an ancient species. And so whether it's hunting or whether it's a candle or a fireplace or something like that, it's that recognition of this is me and my ancestors and a long, long generation of what's brought us to today. So if there's more elements in the world that can bring us back to that connection, it's going to make society overall just that much more aware and present.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's really important because there's so much forward progress that I think we really have to go back to make sure that society doesn't get too lost. But
no, for sure.
Again, it's one of those elements of how many people is too many people, and can you affect that many people? So I think the tribal nature of human beings is probably not like politically or anything, because the word tribalism gets thrown around a lot to describe certain things, but humans were always in clusters, right? They were tribes, groups of small people, and I think the best thing we can do is just affect the people in our tribes, right? Whether that's just your family or it's an eclectic group of people who are at SafariCon right now, or whatever you call it, you know, whatever that is. I mean, those groups of people affect each other, and then they affect the people in their circles, and so on and so forth, and then that's how the spider web effect happens, and that's how stuff moves from generation to generation, or changes happen, or things maintain, or whatever. I mean, you could choose any word you want that kind of either means forward or backward or whatever. It's kind of talking in a circle, but it's interesting. I do want to jump back to something, though, because you kind of mentioned that you went and you did this stuff in South Africa, but you didn't get any details about that, which I'm kind of interested. Like, how does a 15-year-old girl to whatever age you were before you went to UD to go to college, how do you actually go from Maine, go there, and set up a safari organization to where it is actually profitable enough to operate and you have all the licensings you need? Like, there's details in there that I think would be probably pretty interesting to hear about.
Okay, so coming out of my emotional internal stuff, back into the adventure side of things.
Yeah.
So with going to South Africa, university there, got my field guide license from the FIGAZA, Field Guide Association of Southern Africa. Levels of testing, high caliber rifle handling, needed to be able to be proficient to handle a firearm in dangerous game areas. So all of the shooting courses were done with open sight 375. So that's practicing shooting at a charging buffalo, lion, elephant. Where do you shoot them? When you shoot it? What's the kind of safety perimeter to keep your safari guests away while you're on foot? So a lot of the photographic safari elements tied into hunting side of things as well. So all of the registration and stuff was pretty straightforward, and regular guiding associations and stuff. But one of the things that I really was sad about was that because I'm a U.S. citizen, I couldn't get my professional hunting license. So I couldn't guide someone on a hunt. So that's fine. I did the photographic safari stuff and lodge management. And then I found a little loophole that I could do bird hunts. And so I ran English pointers and German shorthair pointers on bird hunting safaris. So I would do driven guinea fowl, and I'd do different ducks and geese, sand grouse over water holes, kind of just building a blind in the reeds and letting them come in or calling them in, and then walk up behind the dogs and do just regular bird hunts with the Franklin and spurfowl and stuff. So that was what I did for my beer money in college.
That's pretty interesting. Most girls waitress. Wait, so when you're doing the bird hunts like that, are you planting the birds like they do here for pheasant or chukar? Is it the same kind of thing, or it's all just wild birds?
100% wild.
Really?
100% wild. And what's amazing about South Africa as a country, you have, I think it's like 7 or 8 different biomes within the country. So a country the size of Texas, you have literally mountains that get snow, to the Indian Ocean, white sand beaches, to grasslands, to acacia forest, to kind of rainforest, to mangroves, to all these different things. So it supports this incredible plethora of game species as well as game birds. So we could go on a 3-4 day bird hunting safari and collect maybe 12 different species of birds.
Wow.
So I kind of catered to people that would book a big game safari hunt, and then would maybe finish up early and still have 3 or 4 days left in their safari, and didn't want to go home early, and didn't want to go do the lion petting zoo thing, or kind of the elephant back safari, whatever tourist trap stuff that they were being recommended. And so I'd take them around with my bird dogs and go and hit up some good bird spots.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't know if there's a place, California's kind of like that. I guess you kind of have a little bit of everything, but in the United States, there's probably not a place like South Africa where you have all that. That's
especially being so close.
Right.
I mean, it truly is the size of a little bit bigger than Texas.
Yeah. So is South Africa the place you would recommend somebody go if they wanted to go on their first, African safari, as it were?
No.
Where would you recommend somebody go as their first?
All my South African friends are going to hear about that. I'm sorry. I take that back. You can go on a great experience and have a great hunt for probably less than a really great elk hunt. I mean, South Africa is extremely affordable.
Really?
It is fairly easy to get to. Great hospitality. They've got everything all figured out, but it depends what you want to get out of it. If you want like wild Africa, I'd say probably the best bang for your buck, Zambia. It's still wild and free. You're not having kind of the game farm, because I'd say South Africa is very similar to Texas, where you have game farms.
Yeah.
So there's an element where you can still go and enjoy a proper hunt that's fair chase on a huge game farm. But if you want that wild and free, elephants through your camp at night, hear a leopard growling next to your tent, kind of like you said, Hemingway kind of esque stuff, I'd say Zambia.
Really? Yeah.
Because you get the plains game and it's still affordable. It's not outrageous to get to.
Yeah.
Big cats.
Relatively safe as far as
very
geopolitically
friendly
goes.
Yeah. Very, very friendly. People are great.
Yeah. So that's where you would say go. What are kind of like, if you set up a hunt in a place like that, what is it typically that people are going for? And this is for people who maybe don't know.
I would say,
let's say you're an average person, and it's like not your bucket list thing to do. It's like you're a UPS driver wants his red Corvette, but you want to go to Zambia and hunt. What do you pick? How long do you go? What do you do?
I would say that would probably be if you booked a Cape Buffalo hunt as your kind of like your top species.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo. What's neat about Zambia is that you have the Luongo River that goes through there, so you can do hippo, crocodile. Again, everything's free range, wild and free. This isn't put and take stuff or anything like that. And so you'd have a good variety of plains game as well to kind of supplement your day-to-day stuff. So for instance, if you're out looking for buffalo, but then you see some great, I don't know, impala or something, you can go after that or something like that. So It's definitely, you still have the variety.
Makes sense. Where is your favorite place to go personally?
Pakistan.
Pakistan?
Yeah.
All right, tell me a Pakistan story.
Okay. Because typical Christian American girls like going hanging out in the mountains in Pakistan.
That's right. They do. I've heard that's a destination.
It's a new up and coming one.
Yeah. Christians and Orthodox Jews all welcome.
I remember that I was hunting it wasn't a Blanford Ural. It was a Sind Ibex. Now, Sind Ibex is kind of like your mountain goat with the big, long...
curly horns,
horns. And we were in an area, and my husband was after the Blanford Ural, which is a wild sheep. And so, like, think about, like, biblical times. Like, you have the gnarly mountains and the ravines, and there's weird etchings from shepherds in the caves, and you're walking through like this dry riverbed and it's all sand. And I mean, I'm with an interpreter. My husband's in a whole different set of mountains, I don't know, maybe 20 miles away. So I'm literally by myself, and I'm like, if anything's going to happen, if I'm not coming home, this is the time when like the kidnappers come out or Taliban comes over the cliffs or something weird happens. But nothing. But I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, this little American girl in Pakistan. And, it was incredibly insightful because everyone was so respectful. There are, of course, cultural differences where it's like a man would never shake hands with a woman who's not in their family or a relative.
Right.
So it's like, oh, here's Ricardo Longoria, and they're, you know, shaking hands and stuff like that with my husband. But with me, it's kind of just like a little, like, kind of a nod or
Right.
something. Just they at least acknowledge my existence.
God forbid you tried to get behind the wheel of the car.
Yes, but giving me a rifle, they were fine with. So it was one of those things that here I am, literally by myself in a tribal region in central Pakistan.
Yeah, who controls
Climbing.
Central Pakistan? Which sect?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we were hunting with how kind of it's almost like a caste system where you have a family that owns the region or the land, and they take care of all of the people and villages within that area. So they provide the jobs, or they're the family that builds the school, or they're the family that makes sure the roadways are clear, or bringing in a medical clinic or something like that. So there's a hierarchy within these regional, again, kind of tribal elements. And this family was the ones that were organizing the hunting for these species in this mountain range. So I would say that the connections were pretty good, that it was like we were working with the head guys of this
Sure.
area. And so we go and we climb, and, you know, it's all day up into the mountains to where these ibex are, because they're way up high and they're in the shadows and stuff. And then we finally see it, and I take the shot and everything's good. And what was so interesting was that even though I was having these like negative thoughts, again, stereotypes, and oh my gosh, like what am I doing? And I'm by myself here and everything like that. The joy of all the 6 or 7 tribal leaders that were with me and guiding me was universal. And it was so cool to be like, hey, I am this little American girl running around in the mountains of Pakistan. And I just had an experience that was completely cross-cultural because of hunting. That they all were super excited for me, and we're all like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And they're, you know, like, not high five because they wouldn't touch me, but like thumbs up and like from a distance.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that it was like, how cool is that I could go anywhere in the world and have a quote unquote hunting experience that everyone understood.
Yeah.
Couldn't speak the same language. We didn't have the same religion.
Certainly different cultures all the way
anything.
across.
So I would say that stuff like that is pretty powerful.
Yeah, that is. I mean, you definitely don't think of hunting and anything in the Middle East, really. You know, you just wouldn't. And your average person wouldn't pick that together. I'm sitting here thinking she's going to say Tanzania or something, right? And you go Pakistan, which is really interesting. I know people hunt in the Middle East, but yeah, I guess that speaks to how powerful the median is, right? That you can come all the way from over here, I mean, more or less a sworn enemy of the Middle East, and all that's set aside, you're safe, you know.
I'm respected.
You're able to harvest that animal, and everybody's together in that. I mean, yeah, that bridges virtually every gap there is. I think you're right. It's really powerful.
And it's so neat to be able to then experience all of the different traditions and elements of hunting with all these different cultures that, I mean, they running down the cliffs, and they're going down, and like, I'm like, whoa, why are they running towards it? Because usually it's like you got to wait with your binos and you're watching, make sure everything goes down, everything's calm. But they're trying to get down there before the animal like fully died so that they could halal it. Mm-hmm. And with the halal, that they kind of, you can do it more graphically, but what they would do is they would just poke a knife into the throat and let a little bit of blood while they're saying the prayers, the whole prayers, and that basically sanctifies the meat so that they could then take it to their village and have it be eaten.
Sure.
So again, am I a trophy hunter? Am I a sport hunter? Am I this? Sure. But at the same time, it was consumed, it was utilized, went for a higher purpose. So, yeah. I mean, that's all kind of neat elements to see those different traditions and, you know, tying into West Africa and East Africa, and even what we do here with an animal. If we shoot something and you first put your hands on it in that moment in time that where you might say thank you, you might feel a little bit sad or something like that. Again, we do it kind of internally, but I don't really know of a hunter that doesn't have that moment, even just in private.
You do. Well, and the thing we do here is there's a lot of hunting alone, right?
Exactly.
Which is different than those situations. So that whole time period from when the animal comes out, or if you're, hunt the way we hunt in Colorado, it's not the same as like Missouri. Like I shot a deer in Missouri this year, but anytime you're hunting in Colorado, it's actually more similar to, hunts across the, the ocean, because you're walking, you're stalking. I mean, if you go on a Rocky Mountain elk hunt in a good area, I mean, you're going to have walked like 40 freaking miles just to get to where you're going. And you're either riding some sloppy donkey to get up there, you're freezing because Colorado's freezing during elk season. And it's this humongous process. And if you're hunting like during the rut and like they're bugling and there's all this crap going on in the woods, and you're like, oh, these are monsters. And, if you're by yourself though, and you take that, there's this whole element before the work that you have to do sets in, because you're like, well, this is gonna suck.
Yeah, pack it out.
Before that, like you take your shot or you loose your arrow or whatever it is, and like you hit that animal, just that it is a sadness thing, right? Like it's a gut wrenching feeling. She's like, wow, I just ended that creature.
Yeah.
And then you're also excited. You're like, wow, this was so hard.
And I
did it. But then you walk up on it and you're just like, wow, like that. There's a mythical creature laying right there.
Yeah.
What is that? Why does it have spears on its head? It's like there's so many thoughts that run through your head before like you let all that go and you get to the work portion of it to make sure that it doesn't go to waste. But I think it's something everybody has to experience, even if you're not a hunter. Like that's like a Ty here. He probably has no interest in hunting, but I think someone needs to at least shoot a white-tailed deer or an elk. Probably not an antelope because they're hard to make taste good. But anything big game wise, because there's a disconnect with like bird hunting's always felt more like fishing to me, because I've done a lot of it. Like the bird doesn't have the same like impact that a big game animal does. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's not as charismatic.
It's not. Yeah, there's not as much to it really. It's just like, oh, it's a bird. It's fun, it's cool, but it's like a fish doesn't feel the same as a deer.
Well, and that's why Kendall Jones got beat up over the lion,
yeah,
or me with a leopard, because it's more iconic. It's more
Disney.
Whoa,
It's Disney.
It's not a whitetail.
Yep.
And we're both women, so that also messes with people's perception of stereotypes. They're like, oh my gosh, women should be life givers, not takers, stuff like that. So
yeah,
it ties into kind of a whole cultural psyche.
Yeah, the Disney psyche is what I call it. The bears, it's like the people who try to feed the bears in Yellowstone. Like, that never pans out. It's like, oh, they're so cute. Why are they not singing and dancing? Like they will be over your corpse. What was the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio where they really depicted the bear attack really well? That was a good movie.
Or something like that.
Yeah, whatever it was. It's like that's the reality. Like he's gonna eat you.
They're not friendly.
From your knee up. He's going to start at your ass, and you're not going to die till he gets to your throat. Like, bears are not your friends. You know what? Wolves are not your friends. Don't reintroduce them. They're monsters. They'll kill your whole herd of sheep, and they won't even eat them. Like, people don't understand what these animals actually are.
Well, I mean, I remember it was actually in Zambia, that we got a call, because when you're hunting in these wild places in Africa, you always have a game scout with you. That's a government official to make sure everything's done by the book. And he got a call that the village down the river had a little boy that was trampled by an elephant. Mm-hmm. And he was maybe 9 or 10 years old and was with a group of other boys walking from school through a cotton field. And there were 3 elephants that then charged him, literally picked him up, carried him around, bashing him against trees on the ground, stomping on him, everything. And that's, it's so crazy to me. But that was kind of, I wouldn't say normal, but that happens. And we went over to that village to meet with the family and stuff, and we ended up paying for the funeral of the boy, because oh my gosh, I mean, it's just heartbreaking. But they took us around and they showed us like the trampled vegetation and stuff, and there's like blood everywhere and everything like that, and it's just absolutely incredible to try to articulate that there is so much human wildlife conflict, that it's not these zoos, it's not these, okay, here's the wildlife over here and they're, very peaceful and nice, but nature is brutal.
Yeah, could you imagine what a death like that would be like at 9 years old, 10 years old? It's horrifying.
I mean, I can't imagine the family and then the other little boys that were there with them and everything like that. But I mean, it's like you have hippos and crocodiles in the river when you go get buckets of water to bring up for cooking or washing, and you have lions and leopards out stalking around. You have elephants. I mean, that's the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
And
that's why they see the animals completely different than we do.
Well, I mean, there's this great quote that says it's something like, animals are only beautiful to someone who has a full belly. And as Westerners, we can enjoy the aesthetics of wildlife or nature or something like that. And we have a value to it being beautiful. But when you are a watermelon farmer and you have 2 acres of watermelons and the damn elephants come and eat them all up or smash them or do anything like that, now all of a sudden your livelihood is completely destroyed. Are you going to like elephants? Are you going to think they're pretty? Are you going to want to take pictures of them and put them up in your house? No, you're going to want to shoot them. You're going to want to destroy them. You're going to want to keep them away. And that's the really interesting balance in these areas where you have people living with wildlife, is how do you articulate that they have value? And then that's where the kind of conservation element comes in, is that if you have hunting and you can explain to the village that you're going to get meat and you're going to get an income, or you're going to be able to supplement your agriculture, then all of a sudden, okay, well, maybe that elephant's fine. I'm not going to go shoot him 20 times with a 22 to get him out of my watermelon patch, stuff like that. So it's that balance that we don't always understand from a Western perspective.
Yeah, just like everything. I mean, that's the one kind of great thing about the United States, is we're so sheltered that we can live these like amazing lives based, world standards. I mean, there's no place like it. You can literally accomplish anything you want here. You can go be a 15-year-old safari guide if you wanted to, or you could start a podcast, or you could start a company. You could do things here that you just can't do anywhere else, because that's a perfect example. You're so limited by the governments and the cultures and the different places around the world that you're not here. Mm-hmm. But on the same, at the same flip side of that coin, rather, when you live in a place like this and you grow up in a place like this and you don't understand anything about cultures, you start to try to dictate what people should and shouldn't do in their lives in other places. And that's what happens here all the time. Some bleeding heart barista from Starbucks would be like, you can't kill elephants. And they'll explain to these people why they can't kill elephants and how it's unacceptable. And they just want to live and thrive. And it's like, well, actually, they killed my son. Does that make sense to you? They're just animals, right? So it's one of those things. I don't think there's any answer. You could just kind of talk in a circle around it, trying to explain or articulate how maybe you could make sense of it to someone, but you just can't.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just like you touched on with the wolves in being out west and being reintroduced and everything, that yes, okay, it would be great if nature could balance itself, but we're so far removed. There's so many people that doesn't exist anymore. And so when they reintroduce something like an apex predator like that you then all of a sudden, you know what, guys, we have to balance that. We have to manage that. Sure, it's great they used to be here, and it's fine that they're here now, but don't limit, the cattle guys from being able to protect their own livelihood. If there's sheep herders or ranchers out there. I mean, I have tons of family who
ranch on the western slopes of Colorado, and no one's excited about it. I haven't talked to a single logical person who is a part of like the ranching community who is excited. Everybody's horrified by it because they know what impact it can have on them. Whereas the people in Boulder who voted that in, they don't know the impact that can have. They just like think it's cute that they used to be here, they should be here.
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen if you took 2 seasons off of hunting white-tailed deer in the United States.
It'd be a plague.
It'd be bad.
I mean, just in the hill country.
Yeah.
It's already so many deer that, it's roadkill everywhere. I mean, you'll see them every day. There'll be new ones around, and that's kind of growing up in Maine. That it was very rare. You didn't have that type of density of deer, but I mean, it's truly something that has to be managed.
Yeah, people don't realize that. Yeah, or like the waterfowl. Could you imagine like 2 or 3 years of not harvesting like mallards and Canadian geese coming down? There would be shit everywhere. Like, people don't realize this. Like, you think the ducks and geese are cute in the park and the golf course now? What if there was 3 billion of them on that one park? Like, these are the things people don't understand that, I don't think you can teach them. But I've really enjoyed you coming in here, and I think we got to do this next time you're up here for SafariCon, because the more time that we spend with you, I think the more intelligent we get. That's a real benefit for us average-brained people. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really happy you came. I'm glad that it all worked out. Years and years of conversation, culminating here just like you're hunting Pakistan. So we're going to let you get back to SafariCon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been The Gauge, hosted by me, Chance Conrado, produced and edited by our guy, Ty Yeager. Shout out to the executive producers, Dustin Pointer and Cody Denton. Marketing and content produced by Riley Choan. Make sure to rate and review this podcast, as well as follow The Gauge on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure to subscribe to The Gauge wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys next time.